Welcome to Jammin' with Jason Mefford, a show where we discuss topics relevant to chief audit executives and professionals in audit, risk, and compliance. We discuss the technical and soft skills needed to navigate the minefields of organizations. You hear best practices and practical advice for helping you advance your career, and we'll even talk about music, mindfulness, and psychology, because we can. So sit back and relax while you listen to the #1 podcast in the world for internal auditors, unscripted and unedited. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Hey, today we are going to talk about a topic that I know many of you may be struggling with or thinking, I got to add that to my audit plan. I got to figure out how we're going to deal with data analytics. Okay, so today I have my friend Joe Oringel with me, and he is the managing director at Visual Risk IQ. And like me, Joe is a rock star, but just in data analytics. So welcome, Joe.
Hi, Jason.
Hi. Now I know, as we've talked before, lots of people are trying to start doing data analytics because everybody knows they're supposed to do it, right? But there seems to be some common things that end up being kind of roadblocks to getting people started. So I want to kind of go through and talk about that with you today, but maybe first just kind of give a little brief introduction, about kind of what you do, because I know there at Visual Risk IQ, you guys do some things different than other people do. So maybe just kind of explain kind of what you guys do and how you help people as well with this.
Sure. Well, thanks for asking. So Visual Risk IQ, we're quite a bit of a unicorn, if you will, Jason, in that we bring together both the business acumen and also the technical and data acumen, and finding those two different skills in the same individual is somewhat like finding a unicorn. I hear that from my recruiter friends who always want to know who's a really solid IT and data analytics audit senior.
But they want all of those skills in one person too, right?
All those skills in one person. So what we do is we help people see and understand data, but particularly we help finance and internal audit people see and understand data. I'm the proud father of a data scientist, a budding data scientist. My son is a college junior, and he and I will be at the MIT Sports Analytics Conference this coming weekend, looking at data, helping tell the coach at his school, infield shift, swing, don't swing, curveball, off speed, fastball. I would tell you that there's a domain knowledge of baseball that taking the best data scientist from our team who's not into baseball and putting them on that team would not yield good results. And you asked about people. The big thing that we see organizations do is they lean too much toward one or two of the skills that are needed in the portfolio, and they lean toward those at the expense of having other skills on the team.
Mm-hmm. Well, because I think it's interesting, like you said, you bring up your son, because I know we've talked about him before. It's kind of like, for anybody who's ever watched the movie Moneyball, right? It's kind of like that, right? But as you said, right, it's not just, the fact of being a data scientist or understanding, how to manipulate, how to analyze data, but you have to have a base understanding of the area that you're looking at as well, right? So that's why you're talking about kind of bringing the business and data acumen together, because I think, like we talked before we started, there's some different blocks that people have, and one of them is around personnel. And I think what you just kind of described, and even like you said, your recruiter friend, hey, I need somebody that's strong in IT audit and data analytics and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, you're probably not going to find one person with all of that stuff.
They need great interpersonal skills. They need to be a really good project manager, change management, strategic thinking, and they need to be up on all the latest technical tools, Tableau, Power BI, and also open source tools like R and Python and
Mm-hmm.
the latest machine learning algorithms. And you just kind of laugh and you think, you're going to find all those things in one individual. And that, back to our firm, right? My background is internal audit first. I led data analytics for a Fortune 100 company when I was in charge of what we called integrated IT auditing. I was both the cyber and data center security guy, but I was also the data analytics person. And what I learned pretty quickly was I didn't even think I could be good at both of those. So I quickly hired a strong data center, IT general controls person underneath me. And then I moved almost exclusively toward financial and operational auditing, what I call auditing with a computer instead of auditing of a computer, right? IT auditing to me is auditing of a computer.
Yeah.
And IT or data analytics is more auditing with a computer, getting the computer to do the math, the science, the manipulation, so that the auditors can draw the right conclusion from the population of data.
Well, yeah, and so again, I mean, I'm putting myself, back in my chief audit executive role, right? So, if I were doing it right now to try to give people some, ideas or tips to kind of take away, right? If you want to start doing data analytics, you realize, or probably need to realize, you're not going to find one person with all of the skills that you need. You're going to need people that have the business and the auditing side, but the data acumen side of it too. Is there kind of a rule of thumb? Because I know you guys work differently with companies too, which I actually really appreciate, and it's kind of my philosophy too, more of the teach to fish instead of just coming in and doing everything for you. But is there kind of a rule of thumb? I mean, if I have an audit department of say 10 or 15 people, is there some point when it's like, okay, it makes sense for you to hire somebody maybe who's more technical as a data scientist on the team versus where maybe that's a skill you just have to outsource, but you've got your auditors that kind of understand the business side and the auditing, you bring in that technical expertise if you need to. But maybe kind of talk about some of that and what you've seen successful for companies to do.
Certainly. Well, what we've done is we've got what we call a body of knowledge. It's basically 7 different areas that we think an organization needs to have skills on their team as it relates to analytics. And 7's a long list, but let me go over them here quickly. Several of them are typical audit kinds of skills: project management, good communication skills, and change management, sort of a strategic thinking. Those 3 different areas: project management, communication, and change management, strategic thinking. If you've got those 3 skills as the baseline, then you're looking to layer on top of them some data acumen, and specifically the domain expertise of finance and internal audit, but the domain experience of your industry, your company, things like that. From a technical skills, right? So 4, right? Project management, communication, change management, strategic thinking. The middle layer of the sandwich, if you will, is the domain expertise of finance and internal audit. And then on top, the next 3 layers are data acquisition, statistics, and also visual reporting, that presentation layer of turning the spreadsheet into pictures. And even among the data science community, you will find data specialists who are stronger or less strong in the data acquisition, data prep
Mm-hmm.
versus statistics, the math, and the visual reporting. I'm quick to cede to my 20-year-old. He's way better at statistics and mathematics even than I am. But being better at math doesn't necessarily make him stronger at some of the data acquisition that's needed
Right.
in our world, or even some of the visual reporting that I think is really the big change in technology over the last 5 or 8 years.
Well, and so from that, from those 7 areas, you can really see kind of how it builds upon each other. You know, like you said, you've got like this baseline area, then you've got kind of, you know, these domain expertise, and then you've got kind of the acquisition statistics and like the analysis and reporting that kind of go over the top of that. So if I'm building, I need to make sure that I've got that baseline first before I really try to jump in to just go hire somebody or just decide, hey, I'm going to start doing data analytics because everybody is and it sounds really cool. If the baseline isn't there, you're probably not going to be very effective, right?
Exactly. And one of the questions that we get all the time is, are we better off hiring the data scientist and teaching them auditing? Or are we better off hiring the auditor and teaching them the data science? And you know, typical politician or auditor, I think the right answer is it depends.
Yeah.
And it depends on the other skills that the individual bring. We work with plenty of organizations who have hired the data skills first and are teaching the auditing.
Mm-hmm.
And those organizations have hired, they've invested in the person's areas where they need to improve, and they've thrived in those roles. Likewise, we also work with people who have the finance and audit domain expertise, and we add or layer the data science on top of their fundamental business and audit acumen. It works both ways. And if I were going to say which would, you know, make me pick one, Joe, you only get one choice. Which would apply? I would say hire the individual with the stronger interpersonal skills, right?
Okay.
Who do you trust from a project management, from a communications, from a change management standpoint? And if you trust the data scientist, interpersonal skills more, hire them and teach the auditing. Or if you trust the auditor's interpersonal skills and they're showing an enthusiasm and a genuine interest in learning the data science, then yes, the data science can be taught as well. What I care more about are the personal attributes. Who is somebody who's going to take feedback well? Who is somebody who is skeptical, who has an enthusiasm for learning and is self-aware? This is what I'm good at. This is what I need to do to improve, and that they're willing to invest and shore up the skills that they might need.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I do have my own personal opinion or predisposition, but you know, like you said, not to sound like a politician, but it does depend. It depends on the person, right? I mean, so if you have somebody who's a good auditor that you think you know has these good interpersonal skills and also can learn well, then sure, you know, maybe go ahead and invest in that audit person. If you can hire, you know, a data scientist, it's usually, I think, probably easier to teach a data scientist how to audit than an auditor how to be a data scientist. Because I think there's a lot more body of knowledge behind that. But like you said, you've got to be careful about the interpersonal skills because I've worked with some really technical people and I've got an IT auditor that just jumps into my mind from before. Guy was brilliant at what he did, but he would sit over in the corner, cross-legged on the ground, very introverted, very awkward dealing with people. And so, you know, could only use him for specific things. He would not be somebody, right, that I would have given more responsibilities to because he didn't have those interpersonal skills, but he was really good at a technical thing. So you do have to kind of consider both sides of that.
Well, and like I mentioned, I came into data analytics from audit first with a strong foundation of coding layered on top of my undergraduate accounting degree.
Hmm.
My business partner is a data scientist first and foremost, came up through the IT ranks, chief technology officer. He's clearly been data first. We started working together 15 years ago inside of PwC. And his project was to recommend technology to the firm that would help our internal audit practice thrive. And the first question was, so what's internal audit? Right. And 15 years ago, I can still remember him asking, what's the difference between internal audit and external audit? He understood, external audit opinion and sign off on the annual 10K. And he knew that that was usually back then, I think, one of 5 or 6 firms that, that was going to sign off on the opinion. He didn't exactly understand the difference between internal audit and external audit. So what I would tell you is, if you're a chief audit executive trying to build analytics capabilities on your team, you can hire almost anyone and work with us to accentuate the positive skills that they bring, and to work with us to shore up the areas that may be new to them. And if what they need to work on are data acquisition and statistics, then our project will have a little bit more, or maybe even a lot more, Kim Jones than Joe Oringel.
Yeah.
But if you've hired a really strong data scientist and you're teaching them internal audit, they're going to see a little more Joe and a little less Kim or David.
Yeah. Yeah. Which makes total sense. And so, like you said, I mean, that's one of the first blocks that a lot of people have, is trying to figure out the personnel issues. And so, like you said, there's kind of these 7 areas. Make sure you got your baseline. Then you got to start figuring out, all right, do you have somebody internal? Do you hire somebody? How are you going to go about this? But it takes some time, to go through this as well. So that's another thing I want everybody to realize, is like, you're not just going to, snap your fingers and all of a sudden a month from now you have this, kick butt kind of data analytics thing going on. It takes a while to do, right? Now, another one, I know that a lot of people seem to struggle with is getting data. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that, because, I know that was one of the issues that I used to have, many years ago, because we couldn't get some of the data that we wanted to actually analyze, right? So what are some of the challenges that people have there, and maybe some things they can do to help actually get data so they can actually analyze it?
Sure. Well, can we talk about your challenge, Jason, with getting data? We tend to break up challenges into one of 2 buckets, right? It's a technical challenge. I don't know what buttons to press. I don't have the data dictionary from SAP. That I have a data dictionary, but it's in German, and I don't know what these tables are. I know I want to look at payroll data, but I'm not sure which payroll tables I need to download. That's a technical problem, right?
Yep.
And then there are also what I'd call organizational or maybe even political problems, and that is an auditor ought to be able to go get the data themselves, right? Our charter allows us unfettered access to the company's books and records. Certainly nobody would quibble if you went to the head of HR and said that you wanted to look through some files, you wanted to look at employment practices or hiring practices. They would let you look through the paper files, to the extent that your organization has paper files. They would let you look at that information. But as soon as you say, I want to download all of the personnel records onto my auditor laptop, then all of a sudden HR starts saying, but you can't have this, or it's sensitive, or things like that. So in the challenge of getting data, do ask yourself, is your problem political, and that you're being blocked from getting the data because of a policy or a security protocol or some other non-technical
Mm-hmm.
problem,
Mm-hmm.
or are you being blocked from a truly technical problem, right? The payroll system is supported by a vendor. The only way we get data files is if we open up a support ticket and the vendor bills us $300 an hour for making the file available. And I'm concerned, Jason, that the file that you're asking for may take them days and days of programmer time to get the data. And does Audit have a blank check to get the data file that you need for the audit? Again, that's more of a political or an organizational problem than necessarily a technical one.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring that up because, again, in my career, I've experienced both of those, right? And especially, because I remember we had one where we needed to access certain records for some different investigation work that we would do. And, we just pretty much couldn't tell them why, but it was, hey, we need XYZ. And I remember, there was a manager that in the IT department that all of that stuff kind of went through. And his first pushback was, no, you can't really have access to that. That's confidential. I can't give you that. So then again, it was kind of the easy thing of, well, here's the audit charter that says we can do it. And tell you what, let's have a meeting with the CIO and he'll make sure and, clarify everything that, yep, when Jason sends you a request, you have my approval to do that. Right. So that was a fairly easy, organizational thing for me to deal with. But I would guess, especially now with all the privacy concerns, that, IT departments are probably, tightening down even more because again, it's like, I remember there was a story of an external accounting firm to be not mentioned that accidentally left a CD of data of all of the high wealth clients for a private bank in the seat back cover or pocket of an airplane. Now, so there is some of that stuff that we have to deal with, and I'm guessing people are experiencing privacy pushback now even more because of some of the breaches, right?
Absolutely. In the short time since you and I have been speaking today, I've got a text message here from a client. Will we be available to help them talk with HR about data redaction?
Yeah.
And the technical problem, the political problems that are disguised as technical problems or vice versa can
Mm-hmm.
often be overcome with data redaction capabilities, right?
Mm-hmm.
We do this just to limit the liability of our firm. We have no interest if you're doing a payroll audit. We don't want to know the names and addresses and the salaries of all of the people that are on your HR master file. We are content to tell you that row number 4703 has overtime compensation that is higher than their base salary. And
So you probably have an issue.
and you might look at the scheduling system and make sure that all of the overtime is bona fide, but we don't want to know their first name, last name,
Yep.
address, cell phone number. In that particular circumstance, we would probably mask or redact the employee's name, build our analytics to compare overtime to base pay, show you the outliers, and then on your computer, not the consultant computer, but on the employee issued computer, we would show you how to update our analytic, update our dashboard so that your list of transactions to investigate might have that person's supervisor or might have that person's department or cost center. But we can build all of the mathematics together to identify the outliers without our staff ever having to touch truly sensitive information.
Yep.
So again, let's separate the technical problem from the political problem, and often we can put in some controls that get people comfortable with the organizational or the political, so that the technical can be overcome.
Yeah, because I think that's interesting. Sometimes what appears at first to maybe be a technical issue may be more of an organizational or political issue that we have to deal with. So I think separating those is good. And also, I think on the technical side, we already talked about how, maybe sometimes the data that we want isn't available in the way that we thought it might be, right? Like maybe the data has to get pulled from, like your example of, well, it's a third party, they're going to have to go do a bunch of development work because maybe the fields we need are there, but they're in 3 different tables or something like that. So we have to be able to pull everything together into one. So there's that side of the technical that we have to deal with. But I think too, there's probably this other side too, which is sometimes we don't know what we're asking for. Because I know I've had that a few times in my career where we thought we were asking for one thing, but it really wasn't what we wanted as well. So you have to, probably some of that comes back to our understanding of it to be able to get the right data that we need by knowing what to ask for.
Right. One of the very common things, the way that we typically engage with our clients is through what we call a data discovery workshop. And
Mm-hmm.
in a day to a day and a half of often in-person time, what we're doing is we're asking the audit team and even the client area, what are the business questions that we want to know the answer to, right? Is there anybody who's on the clock, but um, perhaps there's no evidence of them working? Is there somebody who there is evidence of them doing work, but for some reason the time and attendance system says that they're not working, right? That's what we call wage theft. Your ogre
Mm-hmm.
of a boss says punch out, but keep working, keep sweeping until the restaurant is clean, keep vacuuming until the retail store is spotless. That's wage theft. The pay theft is where you leave for the day and ask your buddy, punch me out at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
being pay theft. But the brainstorming, what questions are we looking to uncover in the audit? What do we want to know the answer to? That happens during brainstorming, but then we're also looking inside the data dictionary at the tables, at the columns. What are the digital evidence that somebody was doing work in the hospital? What are the tables that are the digital evidence that somebody was in the building? Maybe I need badge data together with pay data to see if I've got a problem in those examples.
Mm-hmm.
In the data discovery, we connect the business questions to the digital data. And by having some real digital data in the discovery session, we're able to identify what charts and graphs can practically be developed given the information that we have.
Well, I think that's probably one of the most important steps, is to be clear on that to begin with, before you ever go try to ask for stuff, right? Because it's if you don't know why you're asking for the data or the questions you want answered by analyzing the data, then you're never going to know which stuff to pull, right? And especially as we said, with some of the issues around, political or organizational issues of getting the data, we need to make sure that we really are only getting what we need to have. You don't need a full download of the payroll master file. There's certain fields you probably need, but you don't need the whole thing. And like you said, you don't need names and addresses and everything else. Some identifier so that or can go back and figure out what line 47 is, but a lot of the stuff you don't probably need. So you got to be clear on that to begin with, and in something like this data discovery workshop that you go through.
Very,
Yeah.
very much so. And back to how we work, what organizations often find is in a really thoughtful data discovery session with us where we link the business questions to the digital data. we can answer 80% of the questions with 2 tables or with 3 tables. The last 20% of the questions on the audit plan may require multiple additional data sources to be appended or to be gathered to those first few. There's an expression I like and don't like in the same breath, which is don't boil the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And you certainly can learn data analytics techniques with just 1 or 2 tables, build the capability, build the confidence of your auditee by showing them how you've answered several important questions with analytics, and scope out perhaps 2 or 3 of the additional questions if it requires an especially difficult to get a hold of data source. Scope those out for the follow-up, but let's go in, get out, be agile, develop conclusions with a very finite list of data sources, and that often is a strong recipe for success.
Yeah. Start small, start slow, and then go from there, which is always the best idea, because then you get those small wins along the way. Now, I know we kind of mentioned earlier on, but kind of wanted to maybe kind of wrap up on this too, because I sometimes get the sense that people think, oh, data analytics, I can just kind of, start snapping my fingers and boom, it's going to be done. But this is more of like a multi-year kind of plan. And I know there's a resource that you guys kind of walk clients through to help them kind of understand this and think about which areas to focus on too. So maybe just kind of talk about that a little bit, because as we said, it's some of these small steps. So what are some things people could start doing on their path to get to where they ultimately want to be?
Sure. Well, this is feedback from a client actually that we met with last week. He's now chief audit executive at a third organization since we began working with him 15 years ago, and he thought we would be even more successful and help more CAEs explain to their audit committee how they were going about data analytics, that they were going to invest in a relationship with a data analytics consultant, being us, but that the audit committee should not expect data nirvana in 3 or 6 months after the completion of a single project or even 2 or 3 projects. So we had built for them a maturity model kind of across the top, 5 different stages, anything from ad hoc to repeatable to scheduled to continuous auditing and monitoring, but not just having those 5 steps, because there are certainly other models that you can get out, find online from the software firms that have these different levels of maturity. But back to acquiring the data, or writing your scripts, or writing your audit report and having your audit report reflect the data analytics view, that the 1 through 5 maturity probably varies both from a people standpoint, a process standpoint, and a technology standpoint. So we've built a 3 or 4 page maturity model that puts some words in the boxes of each of those 5 different levels of maturity. And our CAE's advice for us is to share the maturity model with other CAEs. Let them do a bit of a self-assessment, right? Which of these areas are they strongest with today? And importantly, where do they see themselves in 6 or 12 or 18 months? And as you and I were talking before getting started here on the podcast, you can't move from level 1 to level 5 in 90 days in all of these different areas. You've got to have a measured approach on how you're going to move forward.
Yeah. Well, and two, just for anybody who's listening that maybe isn't familiar with maturity models, right? I mean, because like you said, usually they're 5 steps, from whatever they call it, ad hoc up to optimized on the top end. But what you guys have done is actually gone through and kind of had layers, right? So that again, you can think about, well, where am I at on this maturity model vis-a-vis my people?
Mhm.
Or the process, the technology, some of these different aspects that you can actually consider, because what's important in how you usually use them is find out where you're at, right? So you can go through and kind of self-assess yourself, figure out where you're currently at and where you would like to be. And I'll tell you, the top 5 is not where you want to be on all of them. You've got to figure out where the right point is, but then what you're able to do is it starts to give you a project plan at that point. Because if you're scoring a 1 maybe on people and you want to be to a 3 maybe within 2 or 3 years, well, now you see the gap, the difference of what you need to do, right? And at that point, then you can actually start making the plans and start working towards it. Because I love what you said. Don't expect that you're going to have data nirvana in 3 to 6 months. Not going to happen. It's going to take a while.
It is very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, so this is great. I mean, and like you said, this is a great, tool for kind of, people to kind of self-assess. And I think this is kind of genericized, I believe, too. You said, right? Is this something that we could offer to give away to people that listen that actually want a copy of this so that they can go through and take a look at it too?
Certainly, we're happy to send it to anyone via email that drops us a line,
Okay.
and we'll not only send it back to them, but certainly spend, you know, uh, half an hour or an hour getting their feedback on it. Right? What words do they want to put in the boxes? Do they think
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
there are different words that belong in the box based on their company or their industry or their company size? We're always interested in having our feedback on the artifacts that we've built for other client assignments to have those artifacts live and flourish and adapt for other organizations. So yes, happy to share this model, and we'll certainly provide a no cost consultation for anybody that wants to ask us some Q&A
Questions about it?
about the model and give us any feedback on it.
Well, thank you. So I'll make sure and put the stuff in the show notes about that. But what's the best email? What should they email if they're interested in it?
Sure. Well, our company is Visual Risk IQ. So simply info at visualriskiq.com.
Okay.
And again, we'll put that in the show notes as you suggest, and folks can find it, and we'll send it back out to them with an offer to have that no cost consultation.
Well, perfect. So, Joe, thank you. I know we're kind of wrapping up on our time here, so we got to kind of, but just to kind of, again, give a summary and thank you, again, for being willing to share that model with people that listen. Send in the email info at visualriskiq.com, and you can get a copy of that. And again, Joe's also, offered to sit down with you for a few minutes and actually talk about it, see what you think, and get your feedback and kind of see where you're at as well. So we'll have that included down below. But again, everybody, if you're interested in getting started in data analytics, today we've talked about a few things, some of the different roadblocks, if you will, that people have around, personnel issues, the right kind of people that you need on your team, to how you actually get or acquire the data, and then thinking about it kind of from a multi-year plan standpoint, where you are now, where you want to get to. Because like we said, it's gonna take you a little while to do it, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. But Joe, thank you, for coming on. We've known each other for quite a few years, and it's nice to kind of reconnect and let people hear your knowledge, because again, I love what you guys are doing over there, and the way you're actually really helping people improve what they're doing, and make that knowledge resident within their team. Yeah, ultimately you guys kind of work yourself out of a job, which is, It's good. It's good. It's good, but it's bad for business at the same point. But anyway,
Well,
it's
it's good for business. I was saying yesterday, we're not looking for a badge and a cube and a desk at our clients' audit teams, but what we want to do is help the people that they do have that have a badge and have a desk, help them get better at analytics and to be successful in their role. And to do that, very often you need a coach, somebody who knows you, somebody who's been on that journey. And that's what we bring to folks that we work with, is that experience and that on the job ad hoc coaching as it relates to analytics.
Yeah, and really kind of filling in the gaps, if you will, like we were talking about before when we discussed personnel. Excuse me, to make sure that you have, people on your team that can actually implement and go forward with this. So, Joe, again, thank you, and we'll probably have to have you back in the future, I'm sure, as well, because there's a lot to talk about here. But with that, everybody, we're going to sign off for today, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Jamming with Jason. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank you, Jason.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Jamming with Jason. Keep on rocking in the audit world. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you later on the next show. If you'd like to earn continuing professional education for listening to today's episode, head on over to C-Risk Academy at ondemand.criskacademy.com. And that's C as in the letter C, riskacademy.com. Not only do you get a CPE certificate, but you also will have access to the video version of today's show. The views and opinions expressed on this show are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.